For more than 2,000 years, one of the most powerful transformations in human history unfolded, not through armies, kings, or empires, but through silence, compassion, and the search for truth. This is the story of how Buddhism conquered the world without war. Around 2,500 years ago, in the small kingdom of Kapilavastu in northern India, a prince named Siddhartha Gautama walked away from everything, his palace, wealth, and inheritance, to search for the cause of suffering. His journey was not meant to start a religion. It was an inward quest, a revolution of the mind. But what began under the Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya would eventually reshape half the world. When Siddhartha attained enlightenment and became the Buddha, he didn't claim to be a god or prophet. He said only that he had awakened, and that anyone could do the same. He preached not conversion, but understanding, not belief, but awareness. In an age ruled by superstition and violence, this was revolutionary. The Buddha offered a path based on compassion, mindfulness, and the end of suffering, rather than obedience to power. It was not a call to conquer others, but to conquer oneself. The Buddha's message was simple yet profound. He spoke of the Four Noble Truths. That life involves suffering, that suffering arises from desire, that it can end, and that there is a path to end it, the Noble Eightfold Path. These teachings were not bound by caste, class, or creed. Farmers, kings, and beggars sat side by side to listen. And soon, his message began to spread, quietly, organically, without a sword drawn or a territory claimed. When the Buddha passed away around 483 BCE, his followers, the Sangha, carried his teachings across India. They traveled by foot, living simply, sharing the Dhamma through words and example. In time, this network of monks and laypeople became the foundation of a global movement. Buddhism began its journey not as an empire, but as an idea, and ideas, once born, cannot be contained by borders. The true turning point came 2 centuries later with Emperor Ashoka, ruler of the Mauryan Empire, one of the largest in ancient India. Ashoka was not born a pacifist. He was a conqueror, ruthless and ambitious. But after witnessing the mass slaughter of the Kalinga War, where over 100,000 people were killed, Ashoka was changed forever. Haunted by guilt, he turned to the Buddha's teachings. Instead of expanding his empire through bloodshed, Ashoka sought to spread peace. He became history's first recorded ruler to renounce violence and dedicate his reign to compassion. He built monasteries, hospitals, and roads, not for conquest but for connection. He sent Buddhist missionaries to Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Central Asia, and even the Mediterranean world. Ashoka's transformation marked a civilizational shift. Power was no longer about domination, but moral awakening. Through him, Buddhism crossed oceans and deserts, carried not by armies but by emissaries of peace. After Ashoka's reign, Buddhism continued its journey eastward, through trade, travel, and translation. Caravans along the Silk Road carried more than silk and spices, they carried ideas. Monks traveled from India to China, sharing sutras, stories, and statues. In China, Buddhism met Taoism and Confucianism and adapted. It became more than a foreign teaching. It blended with local thought, evolving into Chan Buddhism, later known in Japan as Zen. By the 1st century CE, Buddhist monks were translating scriptures into Chinese. By the 4th century, massive cave temples, like those at Dunhuang and Longmen, stood as stone libraries of wisdom. The transmission of Buddhism was never forced. It was absorbed, not imposed. Each culture it touched reshaped it, giving birth to new forms, new art, new philosophies. In Korea and Japan, kings and scholars adopted it voluntarily. In Southeast Asia, it merged with native traditions, creating vibrant cultures of compassion. By the medieval era, the message of the Buddha had reached from the Himalayas to the Pacific. All of it, without a single war of conversion. Why did Buddhism spread so far, so peacefully? Because it did not threaten, it invited. Unlike many religions that claimed exclusive truth, Buddhism was inclusive. It encouraged questioning. The Buddha himself said, "Do not believe anything merely because you have heard it. Test it. Experience it yourself." This intellectual openness resonated with seekers across cultures. Monks lived humbly, practiced meditation, and embodied peace. Their way of life was itself the message. Villagers saw their calm, their compassion, and wanted to understand the source of it. No soldiers were needed. Inner peace became the most persuasive force. And because Buddhism never sought to erase local traditions, it was never seen as an enemy. It integrated instead of invaded. That is why even after 2 millennia, Buddhism has taken root in countries as different as Thailand, Japan, Tibet, and the United States, each expressing it in unique ways, yet all sharing the same essence. By the time Europe entered its Dark Ages, Buddhist thought had already shaped civilizations across Asia. In the 8th century, Tibetan Buddhism emerged, fusing Indian philosophy with native Bon rituals. The result was a spiritual system both mystical and a practical one that valued meditation as a science of the mind. In Japan, Zen emphasized simplicity, mindfulness, and direct experience. In Sri Lanka and Southeast Asia, Theravada Buddhism preserved the earliest teachings of the Buddha, focusing on discipline and monastic life. Buddhism did not spread through fear of punishment or promise of paradise. It spread through experience, through the transformation of those who practiced it. Its temples became centers of learning. Its monasteries became schools, hospitals, and sanctuaries. It didn't just preach peace, it built societies around it. Even when Buddhism interacted with empires or kings, it never became a tool of aggression. It guided rulers toward moral governance, like the concept of the Dharmaraja, the righteous king. Over centuries, Buddhism became one of the few spiritual traditions that expanded without bloodshed, colonization, or coercion. Unlike other empires that left ruins and borders, the Buddhist empire was built in human consciousness. Its power came from ideas, not armies, from meditation, not manipulation. As Buddhist scholars like Nagarjuna, Vasubandhu, and Shantideva refined its philosophy, Buddhism became one of the most intellectually sophisticated systems in human history. Its concepts, impermanence, interdependence, and non-self, transformed the way people saw existence. Even modern science has found echoes of Buddhist insight. Neuroscience now confirms what meditation practitioners knew for centuries, that the mind can be trained, that perception shapes reality, and that compassion changes the brain. Through philosophy, psychology, and art, Buddhism quietly conquered minds and hearts, not by demanding allegiance, but by revealing truth. For most of history, Buddhism remained centered in Asia. But in the 19th and 20th centuries, as global communication expanded, the West began to take notice. Scholars translated ancient texts. Travelers wrote about monks and monasteries. Spiritual seekers began to question materialism, and found in Buddhism a timeless alternative. When the Dalai Lama went into exile in 1959, he brought Tibetan Buddhism to the world stage. His message, peace, compassion, and nonviolence, inspired millions. By the late 20th century, Zen and mindfulness had entered Western culture. Meditation centers opened in major cities. Psychology began integrating Buddhist concepts like impermanence and detachment. Today, Buddhist ideas are everywhere, from corporate wellness programs to neuroscience labs. And yet, its essence remains unchanged. Understand the mind, end suffering, cultivate compassion. This is how Buddhism continues its conquest, not through power, but through relevance. Buddhism's greatest victory lies not in numbers, but in its influence on how humanity understands consciousness. While empires built walls, Buddhism built insight. While others sought control, it sought liberation. Its central message that happiness comes from within, not from possessions or power, feels more urgent than ever in an age of anxiety, consumerism, and isolation. Meditation, once seen as religious ritual, is now backed by science. It reduces stress, rewires the brain, and fosters empathy. This merging of ancient wisdom and modern research has given Buddhism a new kind of global authority, one rooted not in faith, but evidence. The Buddha's call to look inward has become humanity's call to heal itself. In that sense, his conquest continues, quietly, invisibly, in laboratories, classrooms, and hearts. Every empire in history has relied on fear. Buddhism's empire relies on compassion. It doesn't seek to own people, but to free them. Its dominion is not over land, but over ignorance. The Buddha taught that hatred never ends by hatred, only by love. That simple truth dismantles the logic of war. Through compassion, Buddhism has influenced movements of peace around the world, from Gandhi's nonviolence to Martin Luther King Jr.'s civil rights philosophy, to Thich Nhat Hanh's engaged Buddhism. Its teachings inspired revolutions without bloodshed, revolutions of conscience. Even in times of persecution, in Tibet, Myanmar, or elsewhere, Buddhist monks resisted not with violence, but with meditation and prayer. Their power lay in endurance, not retaliation. In a world addicted to domination, Buddhism offered a different kind of victory, the victory of understanding. Most great empires rise and fall, Rome, Persia, Britain. But Buddhism's empire never collapsed because it was never built on land or wealth. It existed in people's hearts, a moral and spiritual civilization that transcended geography. It spread across India, faded there, but flourished elsewhere. It was banned in some dynasties, but always returned. Because you cannot conquer compassion. Even when statues were destroyed or temples burned, the teachings remained alive in those who practiced them. Every meditation, every act of kindness, every mindful breath, these became the silent soldiers of the Buddha's conquest. It is a victory so subtle that many don't even notice it. But look around the modern world, mindfulness apps, yoga, compassion-based therapy, all are descendants of that ancient revolution. Buddhism has conquered not through force, but through influence, and that influence is now global. What does Buddhism's peaceful conquest teach us today? It teaches that real power is not domination, but transformation. That one awakened mind can change millions more, without a single weapon. In an era of war and division, the Buddha's message remains radical. Peace begins within. Nations can build armies, but no army can defeat hatred like compassion can. No technology can replace mindfulness. No wealth can buy contentment. As humanity faces new crises, climate change, inequality, mental illness, the need for inner clarity grows stronger. Perhaps the world doesn't need another empire. It needs another awakening. And that awakening begins, as it always has, in the human heart. Today, Buddhism counts more than 500 million followers, but its real reach goes beyond numbers. It has entered art, philosophy, and even pop culture. Its ideas echo in films, psychology books, and spiritual movements. But the true essence remains unchanged: peace without conditions, compassion without borders. From the mountains of Tibet to the streets of New York, from monks in saffron robes to modern professionals meditating in offices, the Buddha's revolution continues. It is the only conquest that grows stronger with understanding, not submission. The conquest that liberates, not enslaves. History remembers conquerors by the lands they claimed. But perhaps the greatest conqueror of all was the one who conquered suffering itself. Siddhartha Gautama left no empire, no army, no monuments, only a path. And yet, that path has outlasted kingdoms and rewritten civilizations. His weapon was wisdom. His army was compassion. His victory was peace. The Buddha's conquest was not of people, but of ignorance, not of nations, but of the self. And it continues, quietly, wherever a person chooses mindfulness over anger, kindness over cruelty, awareness over blindness. So how did Buddhism conquer the world without war? It did so by proving that truth is stronger than power, and compassion travels farther than fear. No banners, no battles, no borders, only a simple truth shared from one heart to another. While history celebrates warriors who ruled for decades, the Buddha's message rules across millennia. It reminds us that the greatest revolution is not fought outside, but within. That peace, when lived sincerely, is the most unstoppable force of all. And that sometimes the most powerful way to change the world is simply to sit in stillness and awaken. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more content like this.